Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. I must say I'm really amazed, actually impressed by how Jeunesse just adapted to this whole COVID situation, and with all these virtual events. It's amazing how many people can be reached and actually strengthened the position of Jeunesse in so many markets. So I'm really amazed. So kudos to everybody at Jeunesse for this amazing work. So what I want to talk to you today about is a little bit of the history of stem cells in the big picture, because as you know, you've heard this story many times. Jeunesse was created when Destiny brought Randy, Wendy, and Dr. Newman together, and then Jeunesse was created with a product, Luminous, that essentially, as an effect, supports the natural role of stem cells in the skin. So stem cells is really at the core of Jeunesse identity. And I mean, you have the scientific advisory board that is made out of individuals that all have a great expertise in stem cells. You may have seen some of the panels, some of the discussions that took place over the years, and oftentimes it is about stem cells. So stem cells is definitely at the core and at the heart of Jeunesse. But to me, it still appears that to a large extent, it is almost like a hidden treasure. Like it is there, but somewhere it's not there. Many people, I think, still do not understand how this message about stem cell, this knowledge about stem cells, is probably one of the greatest discoveries of our times. And I think it's important to understand it because being part of Jeunesse, it basically makes you being part of a company that is really at the cutting edge of science. And as Jeunesse, part of the family of Jeunesse, then you are really pioneers in carrying this message out there in the world. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about it and to really understand the magnitude of all these discoveries about stem cells. I think it is important to put all this information into the historical context of all this research. So let's go back to the beginning of it. Let's say probably 19th centuries, early 20th centuries. It's a time of enormous scientific discoveries in physics, in engineering, definitely in medicine. Everything that we know today of body systems, the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, the nervous system, all of this started to be defined around that time. And it's the same thing for the immune system. The immune system was a little bit more elusive because if you dissect the body, you can see the heart, you can see the lung, you can see the digestive system, but you cannot see immune cells. So how scientists started to study the immune system is that they saw that, you know, when you cut your finger and then you get an infection, you get pus that gets into that cut. So they started to see this phenomenon. So they took that pus, they put that under the microscope, and they could see that this was filled with all kinds of cells. Some of these scientists were good artists, so they started to draw these cells, and some of these drawings actually are extremely accurate, phenomenal drawings. So one of these scientists, looking at all these drawings, started to realize that these are not all kinds of different types of cells. Actually, at the end, it's probably 3-4 types of cells at different stages in their development. And if you look at it carefully, you can go backward in their evolution, and it leads you to one cell that is at the source of all these stem cells. And because the pus was white, they became known as white blood cells. But essentially, the idea that there's one lymphocyte that is at the source of all blood cells. And one statement here that is very interesting, it's from a Russian scientist, Alexander Maximow. So in 1905, what this scientist told us is that there is a lymphocyte, and he's saying the lymphocyte in the widest sense of the term because a stem cell is a lymphocyte. But there is such a lymphocyte that depending where it is in the body, it can become all kinds of different types of cells. Now, this statement was way ahead of its time because this is actually the definition of stem cells today. So at that time, it was not really recognized for what it was. So it went into oblivion for several decades until a little bit after the Second World War. Now, we know after the First World War, after Hiroshima, we know that people exposed to radiation basically lose their ability to make blood cells. So this is one of the reasons why they cannot survive. We need, obviously, blood to survive. So at one point in the 1950s, there was an incident at the Boris Kidrich Institute, a nuclear institute in former Yugoslavia, where 5 individuals were exposed to intense radiation. So they recognized the symptoms as the same thing that had been seen in Hiroshima. So they know that these people would not survive, but one thing they knew is that they could not make their own blood. So at least to keep them alive for now, and we would have to do this probably every few months, is to give them a blood transfusion. Red blood cells live in the body about 3 months. So every few months we would have to give them a blood transfusion. And what they realized and discovered is that after only 1 blood transfusion, they started to make their own blood. So it brought back this whole knowledge that there is in the blood this mother cell that is at the origin of all blood cells. So from there on, in the 1960s and after, it was clear that there was in the bone marrow a stem cell at the origin of all blood cells. Now, put that aside, we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Completely separate from all this field of research, a new field of research was emerging around the 1950s, 60s, the field of embryology, where we know that when the sperm meets the ovum, then you get a fertilized ovum, a fertilized egg, and that will lead to the full development of an embryo, of a full human being. So understanding that exists in nature a cell that is going to lead to the full formation of an individual, it means that that cell can make every single tissue and organ of the body. So right from that point on, people started to dream about the ability to harness the power of these cells to repair and regenerate tissues. But it was just a dream. So scientists were able to culture embryonic stem cells from mice, from different animals. You may remember the sheep Dolly, but they were not able to do it for humans until 1998, and that's really the birth of stem cell research as we know it today. In 1998, a scientist was able to grow human embryonic stem cells, and it was the explosion of this field of research. Scientists developed many methods to culture and play with embryonic stem cells, but very rapidly we realized that embryonic stem cells, their destiny is to form a fully grown, formed organism. So they're too wild. It's not possible to recontain them to just become cells of the heart or the brain or one tissue. But as all of this was happening, scientists started to take all these methods developed about embryonic stem cells and start to think about these other stem cells that we have in the bone marrow. Could we do something with them that could allow them to become more than just blood cells? And that's when the discovery was made that actually, since all times, these stem cells had always had the ability of becoming cells of every tissue. And that's really the birth of stem cell research as it is today. And I'm saying this all to say that this sort of mother cell, this universal cell that was a dream for a long time to repair tissues and essentially to put an end to diseases, that was the dream. Well, that cell actually does exist, and you don't get it on the moon or Mars or in the top of the Everest. It's in your bone marrow since the day you're born. So it is a fascinating story, and it completely changes our understanding of health and wellness. So now let's talk about what stem cells are doing in your body, because that's really the message that is important for us. So here's what we know. We fast forward now all these years of research. Here's what stem cells do in the body. Just like you have an immune system, that if you have an infection, the infected area will send a signal to an immune tissue to release immune cells, and then the immune cells will go to the site where there's an infection. In the same way, you have a renewal system. Anytime there's an injury somewhere in the body, this area will release a signal. That signal will go to the bone marrow, will trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. These stem cells will enter into the blood circulation. So after, let's say, 3 to 5 days after an injury, there'll be an increase of anywhere between 3 to 10 folds in the increase in the number of circulating stem cells. Now, these stem cells will circulate everywhere in the body, so how do they know where to go to repair? Is that on the second day, the affected tissue will release locally other compounds that are specifically designed to attract stem cells to that area. When stem cells are circulating into the fine capillaries of the affected tissue, They touch this compound, and it triggers their migration out of the blood into the tissue. And when stem cells are in the tissue, they keep seeing where this compound is being secreted from, which is the area of the damage. So they essentially migrate, crawl to that area, and upon contact with cellular debris of that tissue, they multiply and they become cells of that tissue. This is your natural repair system, renewal system. So in this whole system, there are a few steps. The release of stem cells from the bone marrow, their circulation, their migration, and then their proliferation and transformation in cells of that tissue. Of all these steps, the one that has been the most studied, because we have tool to trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, so we can trigger the release, and the consequence of which is having more stem cells in circulation. So hundreds, if not thousands of studies have looked at the link between the number of stem cells in circulation and health. So let's look at some of the key conclusions. And here I'm going to illustrate some of these conclusions with studies, because, but be clear here, I'm not talking about Revita Blue, I'm not talking about any product, I'm talking about your body, but I want to take examples in the scientific literature so you can see that what I'm telling you is just a free conclusions that is taken out of thin air, but it's really coming from real scientific data, and I want you to see this data. So first conclusion, more stem cells in circulation means that more stem cells are available to participate to the normal process of tissue renewal. Quite simply, what it means, you get two people with the same broken bone, we don't repair at the same speed. Well, the one who repairs faster, it happens because he just has more stem cells in circulation. So here's a study in which scientists counted the number of stem cells in people who showed up at the hospital after a heart attack, and then they separated these people in two groups. People who recovered very well and resumed an active lifestyle, and people who did not recover very well. So nothing was done to them. We just observed them. And the other group, people who did not recover very well, so they either stayed in the hospital or passed away. And when we look at these two groups, people who did not do well had less, or about half the number of stem cells compared to people who did much better. So if adding more stem cells help you repair better, then it begs the question, if I have a means of putting more stem cells in circulation, can I enhance the ability to repair in the people who may not repair very well? The answer is yes. Here's another study, again, with the heart. This is a study that was done at the National Institutes of Health, in which scientists triggered heart attack in mice, then let them recover and separated them in two groups. One group was control, the other group, they simply injected these compounds that trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So the only difference is that the experimental group had more stem cells in circulation. And when we look at the heart, a month later, we can see in the control group significant scar tissue and overall significant cardiovascular problem, cardiomyopathy, heart problems. In the experimental group, we saw almost a complete renewal of the ventricular wall, repair of the heart, and almost normalized cardiovascular function. So in a world where there's nothing we can do to help repair from a heart attack, here's a study telling us that more stem cells can really help the heart. And the message here is not that taking something that put more stem cells in circulation can help repair the heart. The message here is to say that if you can put more stem cells in circulation, it's the natural part of your body to use these stem cells for tissue repair. And the last conclusion, which is to me probably the most important, is the corollary or the contrary of the first two. So the first two tells us more stem cells in circulation is better. The third one is telling us, well, if you happen to have fewer stem cells in circulation, then you may be more inclined, more susceptible to lose your health and develop problems. So let's talk a little bit more about this one, because to me that's really the key message. When I say that this is called to change the way that we practice medicine, that it changes our understanding of health and wellness, this is what I mean. Today, in the world of medicine, our understanding of disease formation is cellular loss. We don't talk about it this way, but that's what it is. If we lose the cells making insulin, we have diabetes. If we lose the cells making dopamine in the brain, we have Parkinson. If we lose cells in the lung, you have emphysema. Think of any kind of age-related problem, and it is always the consequence of the loss of a type of cells. And the general understanding is that we are born, we mature, and when we reach 20 to 25 years of age, we reach optimal health, and after that, cellular loss starts to gain ground, and we age as a consequence of this cellular loss, and we can develop problems in different places. But stem cell research is telling us that this is not what is happening in the body. Go back to that research, that study we just talked about, the heart. So if you look at the heart that has been injured, you can see that stem cells go in the heart. But you can also see, and many studies have looked at this, you can also see that stem cells, they primarily go where there's a problem, but they will also go in the brain, in the lung, in the skin. They will go everywhere to a lesser extent without any injury. So in the background, they still go to various tissues as a normal part of tissue maintenance. So the real phenomenon here is that we don't lose cells as we age. We lose cells from the day we are born. It's just a normal process of life. We simply need to replace the cells that are being lost. So health is not a slow decline. Health is a balance between two phenomena. On one side, we lose cells, and as long as we have enough stem cells to replace the cells that have been lost, then we're fine. When we're young, we have a lot of stem cells. You look at kids, they repair very quickly. But the problem is that as we age, the red marrow that makes stem cells slowly transform into yellow marrow, fatty marrow that does not make stem cells. In that change, I say slowly, it's actually not that slowly. By age about 15, we have lost all of our red marrow into the long bones. By age 25, 28, we are left only with red marrow in the flat bones, like the skull, sternum, rib cage, and the pelvis. And that's it. And from then on, it still continues to decline. So there's a point in our life when we pass age about 30 where somewhere that balance is lost. And we don't have enough stem cells to compensate for cellular loss. And that's why when we pass 30s, we start to realize we don't repair as well as we used to. We start to have different problems here and there in the body. It's because we don't have the same ability to maintain health in the body. And why is it that a person will develop Parkinson's? Somebody else, it will be diabetes. Somebody else, it will be high blood pressure. Whatever the problem is, it's just a slew of factors. It is your genetics, your past injuries, your exposure to environmental toxins, your lifestyle, your ability to rest. You know all of these factors already. This is life. And you know already in your life, if you looked at it and paid attention a little bit, you know what is the weak part of your body. Well, this is where the problems will show up if you have fewer stem cells in circulation and you cannot fully maintain health. So basically, what this is telling us is that the common denominator for developing health problem and losing our health is actually a deficiency or a reduction in the number of stem cells in circulation. So that's an idea that I proposed in the scientific literature in 2013. And at the time, all the data was not there, but there was enough data to really make that assumption, or at least this hypothesis. But at the time, what I said is that there's one way to test for this whole understanding of health, is that if this is true, we simply have to go and count the number of stem cells in the circulation of people having developed various types of health problems and compare that to the number of stem cells in people who are healthy. And we should see statistically fewer stem cells in the bloodstream of people who have, generally speaking, lost their health. They did not have the full ability to maintain their health over time. And now many of these studies have been done. So let's look at these. Again, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying that a product like Revita Blue or other products in the Jeunesse product line are going to help these kinds of problems. This is simply a description of what is happening in your body as you age and as the number of stem cells decline. If we count the number of stem cells in people who are at various stages in the development of diabetes, so normal glucose tolerance, impaired fasting glucose, impaired glucose tolerance, and diabetes, we see a straight line. As people evolve in the problem, they have fewer and fewer stem cells in circulation. If we look at kidney function, so to the left, we see control individual, healthy individuals, and we see their number of stem cells in circulation. Now, if we look at people at different stages in the development of kidney problem, we can see that the number of stem cells in circulation is even less than one-third, even one-fourth the number of stem cells that we found in healthy people. If we make a graph of kidney function versus number of stem cells, we see a straight line. There's a direct relationship between kidney function and how many stem cells we have in circulation. Here's another study. The column to the right is people who went to see their doctors and complained of poor erectile function. To the left, healthy individuals. If we look at the average number of stem cells, we can see that people who complained of poor erectile function have on average half the number of stem cells when compared to healthy people. Now we take all these people and we establish their international index of erectile function. And if we do a graph between the index of erectile function and number of stem cells, we see a straight line. There's a direct relationship between how many stem cells we have in circulation and erectile function. Erectile function has a lot to do about vascular health. So that's probably an area of stem cell science that has been the most documented. There's a direct link between the number of stem cells in circulation and the overall cardiovascular health. But here's one aspect of cardiovascular health: high blood pressure. People with high blood pressure will have on average half the number of stem cells compared to a normal individual. Here's another one with problem with the brain. Development of health problem associated with the brain. Less than half the number of stem cells in circulation. Problems with the lung, same relationship. Problems with joint, same relationship. So there are many more studies. I don't want to go into more of them. I just wanted to show you that this conclusion that I'm going to give you right now is really coming from solid studies done by many scientific teams. It's a very simple conclusion about health, and it tells us more stem cells in circulation means that your body is more able to regain and maintain optimal health. So the big question now is, now that we understand this whole concept of stem cells and what stem cells are doing in the body, what can I do to put more stem cells in circulation? And that brings me back to where I started 25 years ago, and that's how I started to be involved in stem cell research. I started to study an aquatic botanical called Aphanizomenon flos-aquae, AFA, blue-green algae. At the time, I started all the work by collecting stories and looking at what people were reporting about what this product was doing in their lives. We could explain some of these benefits with some of the bioactive compounds that we identified with AFA, but many of the benefits we could not explain. And what was impressive was not only the significance of the benefits, but the broad variety of these benefits, touching the heart, the lung, the liver, the pancreas, the brain, the skin, joints. So we had no idea of how this plant was doing this until one day when a friend of mine sent me an article. The title of the article was "Turning Blood into Brain." The first article I read describing how stem cells are able to transform into cells of various tissues. So we started to think, what if stem cells are the repair system of the body? And today we know that it's the case. And the second question was, what if this plant actually support the release of stem cells from the bone marrow? So it took about a year or two to develop all the assays and to do all the work, but we essentially documented that this is how this plant is working. 1 hour after consumption, we have more stem cells in circulation. So when we discovered this, it was clear to me that it cannot be that there's only one plant in nature that has an effect on stem cells. There has to be other plants. How do we find them? Well, we simply asked the same question. What plant has been known, either globally, internationally, or locally in various remote areas of the world, that have been known to be associated with a broad variety of health benefits? So we can think of goji berry, medicinal mushroom, fucoidan, seaweeds. There are many of these products. We tested a lot of them, and we found that they almost have all an effect on stem cells. But I focused on those that gave us the greatest benefits or the greatest effect. And the next one is sea buckthorn berry. Sea buckthorn berry has an amazing name, Hippophae. Hippo means horse, phae means light. It's one of the rare plants whose name is derived from the benefit of the plant. And it comes from Alexander the Great in his conquest in western China. At one point, he abandoned a group of horses wounded in battle, and he left them to die in a field of sea buckthorn. And he came back a few weeks later, and he saw a herd of healthy and vibrant horses with a shiny coat. And a shiny coat for a horse means health. So basically the berry was called shining horse, so Hippophae, and from there it was incorporated into Chinese medicine, Mongolian medicine, Tibetan medicine, where it has been used for more than 2,000 years for the health of the lung, of the heart, the cardiovascular system, the pancreas, digestive system, and also to help repair from skin injuries or bone fractures. So to me, if you look at all of this, it's telling me it looks like we probably have an effect on stem cells. So we developed an extract. So here's the field on the Tibetan plateau where we harvest the very specific ingredients that we use in Revita Blue. But we developed an extract from this sea buckthorn berry. We published these studies a little bit over a year ago, and we can see that within an hour of consumption of this sea buckthorn extract, we see a significant increase in the number of circulating stem cells. That is different from AFA, it's more long-lasting. And the third one, and the last one that I'll be talking about, is an extract from aloe. And I want to be clear here, it's a very unique extract. We've tested many aloe. Aloe, generally speaking, is a stellar product. It has many, many different kinds of health benefits. But when it comes to its effect on stem cells, this is a very unique ingredient. It is an aloe that has been fractionated with polysaccharide of specific molecular weight. So that specific extract, when tested in people, we can see, again, a significant increase in the number of circulating stem cells. So what is Revita Blue? It is essentially a blend of these various ingredients that have all been documented to support the number of stem cells in circulation. We know how important it is to increase the number, to have more stem cells in circulation, or at least to do the best we can to maximize the number of stem cells, to regain health, but also to maintain it when we have it so that we can stay healthy for a long time. But I want to extend that discussion now to additional product in Jeunesse product line, because it's not just Revita Blue that touches stem cells, and that is really my key message today, that Jeunesse has a lot of products that really have an effect on stem cells. The next one, Reserve. I cannot go into the detail, I won't have the time, but Reserve is a blend of berries, berry extract. They're compounds, they're ingredients that contains a class of compounds referred as polyphenols. Polyphenols are an amazing class of compounds. In the scientific literature, thousands of studies have been published on polyphenols with many, many kinds of health benefits. Among polyphenols, one specific polyphenol is probably the one with the most research, and it is resveratrol. Resveratrol has been involved in many kinds of different health benefits, but here in this discussion, resveratrol has been documented to support the proliferation of stem cells and to support also their transformation into various different types of tissue cells in the body. It is also a strong antioxidant. One of the things that can prevent stem cells from really identifying where in the body we need tissue repair and to migrate into these areas is oxidative stress in the body. So as you take Revita Blue, couple it with Reserve, you get a very nice synergy here to optimize stem cell function in the body. Another one, Lumines. We started this presentation by talking about Lumines, the first product that taps into stem cells. To understand how Lumines works, we need to understand that the skin is the largest organ of the body, and it renews almost every month. It is amazing the power of rejuvenation and regeneration that the skin has. So it does consume a lot of stem cells that are released from the bone marrow that go into the blood, go to the skin. So you have in the skin a layer of stem cells. Their job is to become into all the different cells of the skin to participate to this natural process of skin renewal. But these stem cells in the skin are not immortal. Only stem cells in the bone marrow are immortal. So they need to be replenished. So the renewal of the skin goes from the bone marrow to the blood to the skin, and it's a cycle. So when you apply Lumines on the skin, it contains peptides that basically supports the natural role of stem cells in the skin. So again, another product that taps into the natural role of stem cells in the skin. Reveal is essentially Lumines for the scalp. Each tissue has a fingerprint that will tell stem cells when they reach that tissue the type of cells that is needed in that tissue. So the scalp contains the signature of hair follicles and melanocytes that will make hair color. So as you apply Reveal, all it does is basically reawaken the natural ability of the scalp to do what the scalp naturally does by awakening stem cells in the scalp. So again, another product that taps into the natural role of stem cells in the body. When we understand that one stem cell, when it migrates into a tissue, will become several thousands tissue cells, sometimes several tens of thousands of tissue cells. So there's an enormous factor of amplification in the tissues. So as you release, let's say, 2-3 million stem cells in a day, that means billions of tissue cells. So as we understand this whole phenomenon, we realize that it is an enormous metabolic demand on the body to basically stay healthy. So that is why we need to provide to all these new cells in this process of amplification all the vitamins and minerals that the body needs for all the enzymatic activity needed to all this proper functioning of the cells. And that's where AMPM comes into play by providing all the cells for proper cellular duplication. It's also developed with the aim of protecting the DNA during this process of cellular division. So AMPM will bring ingredients that help every cells, but it really plays a special role here into the natural role of stem cells in the body. And finally, let's talk a little bit about Finity. It's a more complex product to talk about, but very briefly, it's a product that helps maintain the length of telomeres. So that means it gives longevity of cells. As cells duplicate, the telomere shortens until the point where there's no more telomere. That cell can no longer multiply, so it's become a senescent cell, an old cell, so it basically needs to die. So if we can lengthen telomeres, we lengthen the life of cells. But what is important to understand here is that if you lengthen the telomeres to an old cells versus a young cell, you don't get the same outcome. You get much more potential if you can lengthen the telomeres of young cells. So which one are the young cells in your body? They are the cells that were just stem cells the day before. They have entered into a tissue and they have started their process of differentiation into cells of that tissue. So as you take Finity and you optimize the number of these new cells in your body, this is where you have the greatest potential. So that's the message that I wanted to share with you. So really, in conclusion here, cycling back to where I started, I would just like, through this presentation, that everyone just understands the magnitude of everything that is talked about stem cells. All these discoveries about the natural role of stem cells in the body is completely changing our understanding of health and wellness. And Jeunesse ends up to be basically one of the only company, and definitely the only company of its magnitude, to tap into this really cutting-edge science. So it's really making you pioneers into these new fields. So you can use that message and really talk about Jeunesse for what it is, the greatest companies out there. Thank you so much.